Okay, so disclaimer at the beginning. I'm not here on any official capacity from OpenBazaar or the company that I co-founded, OB1. These comments are my own. Okay, so OpenBazaar 2.0. Now is the time to shift to a decentralized marketplace. Before I get into it, a couple questions for you. How many of you have heard of OpenBazaar? Okay, wonderful. I'm very happy to see that. How many of you have used the first version of OpenBazaar? Okay, not bad. Great. How many of you have used the new 2.0 that just came out a few weeks ago? I like that person in the back. Wonderful. Okay, by the end, I would like everyone to have used it, or at least to be compelled to try it out. So, in this presentation, I'm going to talk about what it is, OpenBazaar, why it matters, how it works, both how it worked in the old version, which honestly, not great, and how it works now, really great. And then I'm going to end by talking about why you should use it. This isn't just a really cool tech project. It has implications that I think are really profound. So what is it? Okay, it's actually three things. First, it is a protocol for peer-to-peer secure trade of goods or services. Okay? It's also a network of people engaging in trade using that protocol. And it's the name of the software that you use to access this network as well. So the actual client, the program you download is called OpenBazaar. Very similar to Bitcoin, right? Protocol for exchanging value, a network, and the software, right? Here's what it's not. It is not a website, right? A website is a central place where people go to as a server somewhere, and it can be shut down and whatever. That's not this. This is completely peer-to-peer, computer to computer. It's not a cryptocurrency. I'm not selling you something here. There are plenty of cryptocurrencies out there already. OpenBazaar uses primarily Bitcoin, but you can use other coins. I'll talk about that later. And it's not vaporware, and I'm going to hammer this home as much as I can. This is not some future tech that we're building now. This exists today. You can open your laptop and go to openbazaar.org and use it right now. Okay. So what are some characteristics of OpenBazaar? Well, first, and I think most importantly, it's permissionless. That means because it's open source and free to use, there's no gatekeeper on the network. You download it, you run it, you're a part of the network, right? Completely peer-to-peer, no intermediaries in the system at all. Everyone downloads it to their computer, and it connects to another person directly on their computer, right? There is no central point of failure, central point of control. That also makes it very private. All messages between nodes are end-to-end encrypted. Also, the 2.0 can use Tor. And again, it's being used right now. This is not a cypherpunk dream. This is not, at some point in the future, we're going to build a radically free marketplace using all these technologies. Boy, gee whiz, I can't wait for that day to come. Well, it's here right now. You can use it. And this is not just something we just released. And yeah, technically it works, but not great. That's kind of what version 1 was, to be honest. We've iterated upon what didn't work and made it a whole lot better. Okay, so what does it look like? I'm going to show you some images, possibly. First, you can see for yourself by going to openbazaar.org and downloading it. You don't have to look at some screenshots. If you really don't want to do that, you can go to a search engine for OpenBazaar right now called rawflood.com. It's the first search engine accessible through the web for the 2.0 network. There will be others. And you can look at what kind of stuff people have put online. Okay, so here's a few images of what OpenBazaar 2.0 looks like. In some ways, it's kind of a standard e-commerce experience. You have a search bar here. I searched for games. It's going to bring up all of your listings. You can filter them based on all kinds of different things you want to filter them on. There are multiple search providers in the client. In the first version, the search did not work very well, and if you wanted to use the actual search engine, you had to leave the client and go to a website such as Duo Search. Now you can just select from providers already in the app itself and add new ones as they come on, and the results come right into the client itself. So if you were to click on one of the listings, this is what you'd see. This is a real listing. There's a guy in Sweden offering a nice home, actually. If you look through the pictures, 30 pictures on there. It's a really beautiful place. If that's where you want to spend your cryptocurrency stash, it's only $85,000. If that's not quite your speed, here's a $5 digital item, right? You don't have to just sell physical goods. You don't even have to just sell digital goods. You can sell services as well. Really, whatever you want. Free open marketplace. If you were to attempt to purchase something, this is what you see. So pretty standard QR code. We should all be familiar with using that payment method. But something really neat about 2.0 is it actually has an internal wallet. And once you fund that internal wallet, you can just click Pay from Wallet, and you're done. It makes using cryptocurrency almost too easy. I've spent more than I probably should have already on OpenBazaar. This is what the wallet interface looks like. Pretty standard stuff. Your funds, your transactions down here, sending money, etc. This is what a store looks like. This guy sells some Bitcoin swag. All of his listings, are down there. And then something really neat. This was in 1.0, but it works better in this version. You have chat over here. So you can open up a chat. This is end-to-end encrypted chat with anyone on the network and just start talking to them. Vendors really like that. It's a good way to connect to your buyers. Okay, well, why does this matter? Well, why does Bitcoin matter? Why does cryptocurrency matter? Because it makes us rich? Well, that part's nice. But no, that is not really why Bitcoin matters. At least that's not why I think it matters. I think it matters because it allows an exchange of value without trusting third parties, right? That's kind of what the core value proposition of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies is. And if you look at the original white paper from Satoshi Nakamoto, he says, we propose a system for electronic transactions without relying on trust. Wow. Well, what do you do with this permissionless, decentralized money that doesn't require trust, right? Where do you spend them? What do you do with it? Well, trusted third parties may have been removed from the payment system with cryptocurrencies, but they are everywhere in e-commerce still, right? The standard experience is like an Amazon, an eBay, Etsy, Alibaba, they're all over the world. You're familiar with them. And there are a bunch of problems with these trusted third parties. They take a cut of each transaction. The standard is somewhere between 5 and 20%, depending on the type of good. They monitor the data of everyone involved, which is kind of scary enough on its face, but then the fact that they don't properly secure that data is also kind of terrifying. They censor trade. They do that either for their own benefit. One example is Amazon. Amazon will just straight up not allow some competitors to sell their goods on the network. Also, Amazon will compete by offering their own competing goods. They have like a home basics line or whatever. And if you try to sell in that category, they put their search results of their products above everyone else's, right? So they're not really your friend on that platform. But naturally, they also censor trade on behalf of governments. All kinds of whole categories of goods are not available online because of this censorship. And kind of importantly for how you can use cryptocurrencies, well, they don't really. I mean, there's just not a lot of places online that you can spend your cryptocurrency right now. So what I'm proposing here is that decentralized, permissionless money, cryptocurrency, isn't as powerful if it's used on centralized, permissioned platforms. The benefits you get from it being permissionless are negated if you use it on a platform that is so tightly controlled. So that's why OpenBazaar matters, because it is a decentralized, permissionless commerce platform. Again, open source, no cost to use it. There are no fees. And since it's completely peer-to-peer, there are no middlemen at all, that means there is no cut taken. Zero, no cost. There is no central data collection. Your data is not being hoovered up and put into one place where it can be given to the government or stolen. There is no censorship. There's no one to censor. Trade is between two people. And it uses cryptocurrencies. It has to use cryptocurrencies. There's no other way to pay on the platform. So that makes OpenBazaar the most private, most secure, and most liberating trade platform in existence. Okay, so I'm going to talk through the history of OpenBazaar. By the way, I gave this presentation last year. How many folks were actually here last year when I gave this presentation? Okay, I'll try to not to repeat too much, because some of this is from last year as well. So actually, OpenBazaar started as Dark Market, and that was a hackathon entry in a Toronto hackathon in April of 2014 by Amir Taki and a few other folks, and I think Amir's speaking right after this, which is really cool. Brian Hoffman forked the code and renamed it. He reached out to Amir and the people using building Dark Market. They said, we're not continuing development. He said, okay, I'd like to. So he took over control of the project. We released, I joined shortly after that. We released a pre-alpha at the end of August 2014. It didn't really work. I mean, it kind of worked. I bought a few things on it. But it did get lots of attention. People really liked the idea of a decentralized marketplace. And we started to grow. This developer community started to grow throughout 2014. But we exhausted ourselves. Brian Hoffman, myself, and a third co-founder of the company, OB1, that I'll talk about in a second, it was basically a second job for us, and it was just a passion project. And we wanted to know, how can we sort of do this moving forward? Like, you know, our wives were not appreciating how much time we were spending on it. We weren't getting paid for it. So we decided to seek venture capital funding early in 2015. And we succeeded. I'm the co-founder of OB1 company, which was founded in April of 2015. And we got a $1 million seed investment from Andreessen Horowitz and Union Square Ventures. And then we released version 1.0 in April of 2016. So we worked on it a year, put the 1.0 out. We had several 100,000 downloads from all over the world. A lot of it was from a sort of an initial bump. Like, a lot of people got on board and were excited about it. And there remained a devoted small group of users since 1.0 launched that really found it useful. But the growth was really sideways. It just was kind of the same core group, and it wasn't really increasing. And so we talked, you know, to people trying to use the platform. And there's some real severe limitations that were preventing growth from happening. But it was good enough. The proof of concept was shown. There was enough interest that OB1 was able to get a second seed round for $3.25 million. And with that, we've been working since the 1.0 was released to release the 2.0, which just came out in beta 3 weeks ago, something like that. Brand spanking new. Okay, looks like we just saw that one. Let's keep going. Okay, so I'm going to walk through how it works exactly. First of all, it is currently a desktop application. Both web and mobile are in development. This is completely peer-to-peer, and doing something in browser or on mobile is really hard to do in a completely peer-to-peer fashion, mobile especially because of bandwidth and battery issues, but we're getting there. It's two programs, a server and a client. The server actually creates, signs, and verifies contracts which go back and forth between nodes in the network that's used for trade. It communicates the peer-to-peer network, and it handles the Bitcoin multisig. Basically, I mean, the server does you know, the work involved, and the client is the graphical interface to control the server, right? Standard sort of setup. It uses an API to communicate. That does mean that the client and server can be on separate machines. You don't just have to run it locally, server and client. You can run the client locally and the server, you know, a VPS or wherever, or a Raspberry Pi, whatever. Okay, so under the hood, OpenBazaar uses something called Ricardian Contracts. Basically, that means the definition is places the defining elements of a legal agreement into a format that can be expressed and executed in software. It's really interesting. All the trade that's needed, or all the information that's needed for a trade to happen, is contained in one JSON document. And then it's signed by public key cryptography. It's signed by each user each step of the way. So the seller creates the listing, signs it, so that it can't be tampered with. The buyer then agrees with the terms, the amount, etc., signs it, and it goes back to the seller, right? Just back and forth. So it basically means the most recent contract has this verifiable record of trade at every point in the process. This is what it actually looks like. I mean, it's just JSON standard stuff. You have all the information included in there, and then it gets signed. Each node has a globally unique identifier. It's sort of your keys to the node. And then each node has a hierarchical deterministic wallet. All messages are signed and encrypted, public key, I just mentioned that. The listings get a unique identifier, actually a hash. So listings are a hash, and that's how you navigate into them in the client. Yeah, all end-to-end encrypted. Yeah, the moderation is really interesting. So naturally, if you're using a private marketplace, how can you trust the person on the other end? Well, actually, for larger purchases, or any purchase, but usually it's the smaller stuff you don't sweat it. But you can use escrow, a 2 of 3 multi-sig. So the buyer and the seller and a third party are the 3 key holders. 2 of them have to agree before the funds are released, and that allows for secure escrow. The neat thing about that is no organization runs that escrow. It's an open marketplace for dispute resolution. Anyone can offer escrow services. The best float to the top, have a reputation, and then they get a cut whenever they settle a dispute. So actually, the moderator, we call them moderators, the dispute resolution agent. The moderators don't even know they've been selected as a moderator on a trade unless the dispute's open. So that gives everyone more privacy as well. Yeah, something new in the 2.0 is that we now use IPFS. So how many of you are familiar with IPFS? Yeah, I love talking to this crowd because normally that's not true. Interplanetary file system, I'll talk a little bit about it later, but it allows for content to be reseeded and distributed, which didn't happen in the version 1. Whoa. Let's see here. Wow. Okay. There we go. So here were some of the limitations I talked about earlier of the version 1. Nodes were forced to be online constantly. It is a peer-to-peer network. If your store is not accessible to other people on the network, it's not accessible to other people on the network. They just will see nothing. There's nothing there. They can't engage in trade. Product discovery was bad, search especially. We actually used a distributed hash table for search where you put keywords in, search the entire distributed hash table to get those keywords out. It was easily gameable, it was slow, it just did not work very well. There was a significant lack of common e-commerce features like inventory management, things that vendors expect just were not there. It was not anonymous. Yes, the trade was encrypted, but there's no ability to use Tor or obfuscate your IP address in any way. Users had to have an existing Bitcoin wallet and be knowledgeable about how to use Bitcoin. And generally, there was some technical knowledge needed if you ran into problems especially. A little bit higher barrier to entry. So in the 2.0, we've addressed some of this. We've taken the feedback from the 1.0 and made some major improvements. So first of all, one of the biggest is the shift to IPFS on the back end. As I mentioned, it's a distributed, distributed file system. So basically what happens is if you view someone else's store on the network, with their listings, you then reseed that information to other people on the network, and if that vendor's store goes offline, it's then offered up by anyone who's reseeded it. What that basically means is your store can go offline, and people can still buy stuff from you. We created an internal wallet in the 2.0, so you don't really have to have that much knowledge how Bitcoin works. I'll talk about that later. We switched to Go language from Python. That's not that important. The developers assure me it is, so maybe it is. I don't know. Better product discovery. Third-party search is now within the client, as I mentioned earlier. There is Tor integration. There's new features like inventory management, and the design is significantly improved. Okay, so I don't think I need to dive into this. You guys already understand, I think, generally how IPFS works. The main difference is that it's a hashed-based system. So a location-based system is like, if you were looking for the Satoshi white paper, it's at bitcoin.org/whitepaper, whatever. And that's where it is. So even if you had it on your hard drive, and all of your friends had it on their hard drives, if you were to look up the location, it would just go to some server somewhere in the world at that specific location. It's really inefficient and not distributed at all. If that server goes down, it's just not accessible. This is different. All content is defined by its hash, right? And so in this network, peer-to-peer network, you can pull that hash from anyone's computer that's running a node. So much better system. Anyone who's running an IPFS node, and in OpenBazaar, you are automatically running an IPFS node if you're running the 2.0 software. And then if you view someone's listings, it automatically will receive it to other people. Excuse me. There's also gateways that people can optionally run. Where they will offer for people to push content to them. So it's not just the voluntary reseeding. If you view, you can push content to other people as well, if they're willing to do that. But it's not, by default, a push network like other networks. So the internal wallet is really interesting because it lets us do a couple really cool things, more complicated transactions. So one is time lock. In the version 1, we had an issue where you'd have the 2 or 3 multisig, but then the buyer, even the moderator sometimes, would be unresponsive after the trade ended, and the vendor just sat there looking at the Bitcoin in the escrow and saying, "Oh, great, you know, it's just stuck there unless one of these other people responds." Now we can set up time lock. So after a certain amount of blocks have passed, it'll automatically be released to the vendor unless like a dispute's opened or something. Also, 1 of 2 multisig. How do you do offline ordering with Bitcoin, right? If you send a direct transaction to them and they went offline and never return, where does that Bitcoin go? So now we, with the internal wallet, can create a 1 of 2 multisig. So if it's an offline order, you send it into a 1 of 2 multisig, and then either party can pull those funds out, right? If they never come back online, you just pull your money back. If they come back online, they take it, and the trade continues as normal. I already mentioned that. I'm going to keep going here. I'm running out of time. Okay. So why should you use it? This is all cool, but why should you use it? Well, for whatever reason that you use Bitcoin or Tor or IPFS or peer-to-peer networks, encrypted chat, public key cryptography, right? You guys and gals are excited about that list of stuff. Why? Well, I don't know. I know why I'm excited about it. But if you are interested in this, you should be interested in OpenBazaar, and you should use it because it's taking all of this technology and applying it to a specific activity, which is trade online. Right? It combines these liberating technologies to make a radically free and open marketplace. But if that's not good enough for you, there's 2 other types of reasons that may convince you. 1 is just practical reasons. The second is ideological reasons. I guess it's the first reason either way, whatever is more important to you. Okay, so what are some practical reasons to use OpenBazaar? Well, first, the trade is cheaper. There is no cut being taken, again, right? If the average cut is, let's say it's 10%, then that means the vendor can redistribute some of that cut by offering a discount to the buyer. Right. Yeah, there's also no credit card fee. Now, that may have been a more compelling point in past years because Bitcoin fees fluctuate. Right now, not a huge cost. Hopefully that continues. There's no sign up, account creation, or login, right? You're not sort of being monitored. You don't have to apply. You just use it. Practically very simple to set up. The only requirements are a computer and the internet. That's it. To engage in free trade with anyone else on the planet at no cost, all you need to have is a computer and the internet, right? There's no exclusion on this network. Other networks exclude based on age. You may not think about that. Most people here are, I assume everyone is an adult, but children can be very entrepreneurial as well, right? Children can use Bitcoin. They can buy and sell stuff, and you don't have to apply to use this network, right? So if you have a teenage kid who wants to be an entrepreneur, set them up with OpenBazaar. No exclusion based on nationality, right? A lot of the big platforms, if you are in Iran or certain countries, you just can't use them. Not true of OpenBazaar. Or wealth, right? No application to join some credit card network, uses Bitcoin, anyone can join. Beliefs as well. So I guess this is kind of controversial, but there are other platforms that will censor based on ideological beliefs. So in the US, there's Etsy, which does not allow the sale of goods of the NFL football team, the Redskins, because they say that's discriminatory. Platforms will censor based on beliefs, and that can't happen on OpenBazaar. More practical reasons. Well, the trade's private. That's kind of an obvious one. There's no central organization collecting the data. You can't have a breach of your data because that big database doesn't exist. The platform's not going to be taken down. There is no central point of failure to control, right? You can be guaranteed of that. There's no one server that anyone is looking for that they can take down, and all of a sudden, everything's gone. Won't happen. The code's open source, too. So these other platforms that get taken down, you don't necessarily know what they're actually doing, right? With this, you do, or can. No exit scams. Escrow is done individually. There's no one escrow agent. So it's just not possible. More reasons. The lack of censorship allows you to buy and sell unique goods and services. And I think, if anyone, if I'm wrong, tell me, I think this is the only truly free marketplace in existence, meaning there is no one that can exert any control over what's listed on the platform. So what happens when you have a network where literally no one can control it? Well, you're going to have some interesting stuff on there. It uses cryptocurrency solely. So this is a place where cryptocurrency is always accepted. If you don't know how to spend your funds, OpenBazaar is always there for you. It's not controlled by the platform either. You're not trusting your private keys to someone on the platform in order to use Bitcoin or anything, right? You control it yourself. And also, if you're new to cryptocurrency and you're looking to grow your stash, but you don't want to put in a credit card with a company to gain some Bitcoin or whatever, you can sell goods or services and get Bitcoin in return. You don't even have to purchase it to get started in cryptocurrencies. Okay, so those are some practical reasons. These are some ideological reasons to use OpenBazaar. First, it hides online commerce from the surveillance state. Every single trade that is done online right now is an open book to a handful of companies and all the governments of the world, right? This is a fundamental part of your life, trade that you do, buying and selling stuff. And they know all of it, pretty much without exception if you do it online. Unless you use something like dang it, sorry. Don't know why it's doing that. Right, unless you use OpenBazaar, because every trade on OpenBazaar gives them one less piece of information to use against us. Paying taxes is your decision. If you have moral objections to taxation and what's done with taxation, every trade on OpenBazaar can remove some tax revenue from the state. Another ideological reason, using OpenBazaar improves the platform. If you think decentralization is the future of the internet and sort of this freedom movement, there's no way that you're going to transition from centralized systems to decentralized ones without having a period where ideologically motivated people are using the system and making it better. It's not going to happen. We're not going to have some perfect product fall out of the sky that everyone can use, right? This is an iterative process, and we need your help to do that. I mentioned that's already happened with version 1 to version 2. This iteration is already happening, but we need more of it. Okay, so OpenBazaar is useful now, but it will be indispensable if governments further restrict trade. We're actually, like historically speaking, we're in a period right now of relatively open trade, but that may not always be true. That there's nothing that we should not take open trade for granted. So if we have trade wars between countries, if we have massive capital flight, we are going to see restrictions on trade. That, I think, is very likely to happen. And we need to have the tech ready now for a mass movement towards decentralized trades if governments overplay their hand, right? If it gets to that point where, oh, dang, China, whatever, someone is restricting trade in a very severe way, well, we can't start building something then. We need to already have it in place. And that's what OpenBazaar is. Okay, so if you want to find out more, you can go to our GitHub. You can go to our blog. Our Slack community has thousands of people that are excited about this. It's a really cool community. There's a subreddit as well, our Bitcoin. I urge you to use it. There's actually a feedback button right in the client you can click to contact us directly to give us your thoughts on what needs to improve, what you like about it, a bug, etc. That's my email address. Feel free to shoot me an email, and I'm now happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have 10 minutes for questions. Anyone has questions? Here, okay.
Hi, thank you for your presentation over here on the left. Yeah. So I've never used OpenBazaar. I guess there is some sort of a seller-buyer rating included in the client. Is that correct?
So reputation right now is on the seller side. There is no buyer reputation. There would be no cost. There's no cost to creating new nodes or anything. So building that system in a decentralized way that can't be, sort of gamed is difficult. But yes, you can leave reviews and ratings on the buyer side and moderators, but not sellers yet.
Okay. Well, and the second question, just real quick, the moderators. I guess it can work any way they choose, but from your experience, how do they work? Okay, so let's say the trade is disputed, some physical goods had been traded. How do they handle that?
So the neat thing about that is it's not a one-size-fits-all sort of policy. And one of the big complaints that we've heard from vendors on other platforms is the fact that, first of all, the platform just sides with the buyer most of the time, no matter what happens. That's a common problem. But second, they sort of have one standard accepted way to resolve a dispute. And because they have that way that is then known to the public, that allows people to sort of game it, right? Because then they know they can attack it. So that's why this that's why this marketplace for dispute resolution allows people to try new ideas, and whichever one of those is the best, that floats to the top. Specifically what they do, I'm not that familiar with. I've not been a moderator myself, but there is a small community on like the Slack that will talk about dispute resolution stuff. So if you're interested, I encourage you to check it out.
Here we have another question.
Hello, thank you for your speech. I want to ask about two things. You mentioned two rounds of VC funding, right? So you also mentioned the decentralization, but VC funding means that you have some company created somewhere, and you have like CEO, you have like management,
Yep.
and whatnot. So isn't this some kind of centralization of at least development?
It's a great question. So that's why it's really important to distinguish between OpenBazaar and OB1. OpenBazaar, the open source, free project that I've been talking about, has not gotten any investment at all. OB1, the company, is what's received all of the investment. So OB1 has not. We have led the development of OpenBazaar, though it's an open source community, so others have contributed. But we are not putting any monetization or stuff directly into the application itself. So there's no, cut being taken when trades resolve or anything like that. So I don't see that as centralization. Everything you do in OpenBazaar can be done in a decentralized way.
So there is no threat of let's say, U.S. government cracking down on the company OB1 and
because it's open source.
Yeah.
If they try to compel OB1 to put some code in that does something malicious, I would be the first person to tell everyone to fork it away and create something without that code. I mean, yes, absolutely.
So what is your revenue stream then? If you don't
So
take any
OB1 is going to offer paid services to OpenBazaar users, which we have not done yet. So it's coming.
Okay, more questions? Anyone? Okay.
So hello, thanks for your presentation. Just to understand, what can be, for example, the kind of services that can be sold on your platform? So do you wish to propose all kind of services, a little bit like an Airbnb, Uber, and everybody will be able to open his web page as we saw a shop on the website? And anyway, it is interesting, what will be the paid services that OB1 will propose also? To understand also, it's the second question after.
Sure.
After you just
So two questions in there. First, what services can people offer just themselves in the network? Anything you want. You mentioned like Airbnb. There is an OBNB keyword that people are using to offer renting out their spaces right now already. So there are people offering that. I would anticipate moving forward, if any particular niche started growing, what you would then see is the moderators that the sellers selected for their services would probably be experts in that specific issue area and just focus on those services. So if a developer's offering services, the buyer and seller are going to choose a moderator that has the ability to determine whether or not they delivered on their promises. The second question is OB1 services, and we look at it this way. If we are the people that are leading a movement away from centralized systems that hundreds of millions of people use and towards a decentralized system, decentralization has all kinds of benefits, but it has some drawbacks too, and there's always some pain points if you're doing something in a fully decentralized way. So where there are some of those pain points, we want to come in and fill that gap as OB1. In a voluntary way, you will never be forced to use OB1 services or anyone's centralized services. Search is one of those. You may have noticed that OB1 was a search engine within the client already. So we're already providing search as a service to users. That can be monetized. Possibly hosting of the store, if people want to host a store through like a VPS. There's all kinds of services we plan on offering, just none of them are public yet.
Okay, we have time for a few more questions. No?
Hi. I've been wondering if you maybe made some improvement in the new version about the pricing of shipments, because I found it quite problematic to figure out how to put the price of the shipping on the product that I would maybe like to ship to different places in the world.
Yeah. In the first version, you said you found it problematic? Yeah, for sure. So that's one of the major vendor improvements we've made is first, inventory management is in there. Variants are in there, and then much more flexible shipping options. So if you haven't checked out 2.0 yet, I encourage you to check it out and see what we've done to improve that. One thing I actually forgot to mention is we actually have integrated with Shapeshift. So you can spend any, it's based on Bitcoin, but you can spend any cryptocurrency you want to fund your OpenBazaar wallet or pay for transactions. And moving forward, we really want to make OpenBazaar currency agnostic. You should be able to buy or sell in any coin that you want. That's actually quite difficult to do technically. So, you know, that's a aspirational thing. But for now, you can use Shapeshift as well.
One last question.
Is anything really able to be sold on the platform? For example, weapons, drugs, bomb-making materials, or anything like that?
So again, because of the architecture of the way that it is set up as a completely distributed peer-to-peer network, there is no central organization that can go into someone's computer and shut down the OpenBazaar store or take their listings offline or whatever. So the answer is yes, anything can be sold. Now, the search providers that are in the client are going to censor based on what's legal in their jurisdiction if they are like a company or something, like OB1. We don't show some illegal stuff that's in the United States. But any search provider can, you know, stand up a search provider that, or a search engine that will respond with all listings. And in the future, we have a new feature coming out called Channels, which actually doesn't rely on any third provider at all. It's a curated list. It's just a JSON list of listings and stores that is actually reseated on IPFS itself. So you'll have this curated list of stuff that is also incensorable. There's no third party to take it down. So the answer is yes. There are ways to mitigate people doing, you know, really nasty stuff in terms of what people can see, but there's no way to actually go and censor trade on the network.
Well, thank you very much again. Great talk. Big ups
Thank you.
for Sam.